Story 1. The House That Hums. The beach was still as glass when they arrived, the tide pulled low and whispering. The sand stretched in pale streaks like bone dust, untouched save for the occasional crab track or gull feather. An endless field of gray sky met the horizon, blurring water and clouds into one desaturated expanse. Cora stopped at the edge of the driveway and took it all in. "It's so quiet," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Behind her, Caleb wrestled with the latch of the truck bed. "Good kind of quiet or bad kind? Too early to say." The house before them perched on a gentle rise above the beach, a two-story coastal cottage, all salt-bleached cedar shingles and warped white trim. The realtor had called it a fixer-upper with potential. Cora's mother had called it haunted as hell. But they needed the escape. After the year they'd had, Caleb's breakdown at work, Cora's miscarriages, they needed distance, quiet, and healing. When Caleb's aunt willed them the house, it had felt like a lifeline. "Let's just get unpacked before it starts raining," Caleb said, hefting a duffel over his shoulder. The clouds overhead churned with slow menace, the air charged and heavy. Not quite thunderstorm, not yet. Cora lingered, eyes on the upper windows. The second floor had 6 of them. She counted them again. 5. She blinked. Counted again. 6. "Cora?" Caleb's voice tugged her back. He was already at the porch, waiting with the front door open. "You coming?" She nodded and hurried to catch up, boots crunching softly on the gravel. Her eyes avoided the windows this time. Inside, the air smelled of brine, dust, and thyme. The floorboards creaked under their steps like tired bones. The layout was open, living room spilling into a kitchen, faded wallpaper peeling at the corners. Old furniture draped in yellowing sheets. Caleb dropped the duffel by the couch and ran a hand through his dark curls. "Feels like something out of a ghost movie." Cora peeled back one of the sheets. "Let's just hope it's a happy ending." She meant it as a joke, but it didn't land. Caleb didn't smile. They settled into their first night with a bottle of wine, a half-hearted game of cards, and distant lightning flickering beyond the windows. By midnight, the wind had picked up, moaning through the chimney. Cora lay awake in the upstairs bedroom, watching the curtains breathe with each gust. That's when she heard it. A low, steady hum. Not mechanical. Not musical. Like something alive, resonating from beneath the floor. She sat up, heart thudding. The hum stopped. Caleb stirred beside her. "You hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" "Nothing," she said, though her ears were still ringing. "Just the wind." But she knew it wasn't. And it wasn't the last time she'd hear it. The next morning dawned gray and wet. Rain tapped gently on the windows as mist drifted in off the sea, veiling the shoreline. Cora stood barefoot in the kitchen, warming her hands around a mug of bitter coffee. She hadn't told Caleb about the hum, not really. Not the way it felt, like it had passed through her rather than around her. Like the house had spoken and chosen her to listen. Caleb came in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep. You hear the wind all night?" She hesitated. "Yeah. The wind." He kissed her on the cheek and opened the fridge, frowning at the barren shelves. "We should probably drive into town. Stock up." They ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons and the creak of the house settling around them. At one point Caleb froze with his spoon halfway to his mouth. "You feel that?" Cora looked up. "What?" He didn't answer right away. Just stood and walked to the wall near the pantry, pressing his hand against the plaster. His brow furrowed. "It's buzzing." For a second there, Cora's heart skipped. "Like humming?" "Yeah." He turned to her slowly. "You felt it too?" "Last night." They stared at each other across the table. Caleb sat back down, slower this time, unsettled. "Old houses make noise," he said, though the words lacked conviction. Yeah, Cora replied. Noise. They headed into town after breakfast. The nearest grocery store was 20 minutes away down a winding coastal highway that skirted crumbling cliffs and fog-drenched pines. The town of Kettles Bay was small, only a few hundred people, most of them old. Cora wandered the aisles while Caleb chatted up the cashier, trying to glean local history. She caught a few words as she passed by. Aunt June Beach House, and strange sounds. The cashier, a woman in her 50s with deeply lined cheeks and a smoker's rasp, raised an eyebrow. You're staying there? Caleb gave a sheepish smile. Just for a while. Inherited it. The woman leaned in. If you hear anything under your feet, you let that house be. Don't go poking around. Caleb laughed it off, but her eyes stayed serious. Cora waited until they were in the truck before she said anything. What did she mean by that? Don't go poking around? Probably just local folklore. Small towns always have their ghost stories. But that night, the humming came back. Stronger. It started under the bed this time, a low vibration that made the floor tremble like a speaker pushing bass. Cora sat bolt upright, and Caleb followed a second later. I feel it, he said. Then footsteps. In the hall. Slow. Deliberate. Wood creaking with weight. Caleb grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and tiptoed to the door. He cracked it open. Nothing. Just darkness. But the humming continued, now joined by something else. A whisper, just beneath the sound. Cora pressed her hands to her ears. Do you hear it saying something? Caleb turned to her, pale-faced. Yes. Caleb swept the beam of the flashlight down the hallway. The floorboards were empty, but the air felt thicker, like walking into a room with no oxygen. The hum persisted, vibrating the floor beneath their bare feet, whispering beneath the sound like a voice speaking through water. Cora clutched the doorway. What's it saying? Caleb shook his head. I can't make it out. They followed the sound. The hallway was lined with old picture frames, sepia-toned photographs of people they didn't know. Cora had glanced at them briefly the day before, assuming they were relics of Caleb's aunt's eccentric taste. But now they felt wrong. The faces were too blurred, the smiles too wide or entirely absent. She couldn't tell if their eyes were following her or if it was just a trick of the dark. They stopped at the attic door at the end of the hall. The humming was strongest here. Cora put her hand on the knob. It was warm. Not from sunlight. It had rained all day and the upper floor was cold. This was heat like breath, like blood. Don't, Caleb said. She looked at him. Why not? Because I think the house wants us to. They backed away. The humming stopped. Just like that, gone. Not fading, not trailing off. Cut. As if something had been holding a note and simply released it. They stood in silence for several seconds, the quiet around them suddenly oppressive. Cora turned back toward the bedroom. Let's just go to sleep. Try to anyway. Either of them slept. The next morning, they made the decision to leave. Just for a few days, Caleb said. Go back into town, maybe find a motel, regroup. Get their bearings. But when they went to start the truck, it wouldn't turn over. Battery dead. Completely, unnaturally dead. Not a single click or whir. Just silence. Cora turned to Caleb. We left the lights on. No. I checked last night. Turned everything off. They looked at each other, the same fear blooming behind their eyes, unspoken but understood. The house didn't want them to leave. Inside, they sat at the kitchen table, planning their next move. Try the battery with jumper cables. Hike to town if they had to. Maybe even call a tow. But the power was out too. No reception. No signal. Not even a flicker from the landline by the stairs. It just hissed faintly. like an untuned radio. That's when they noticed the door to the basement was open. Neither of them remembered opening it. Cora stood, something cold trickling down her spine. The humming was back again, soft now, like it was waiting. Calling. "Caleb," she whispered. "It's coming from down there now." He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the basement door like it was breathing. Finally, he said, "I think we have to go down." Cora's voice trembled. "And if we don't? Then it'll come up." The flashlight flickered as they descended the stairs. The basement smelled of damp earth and salt, with a metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. The wooden steps groaned underfoot, each creak louder than it should have been. Cora held Caleb's hand tightly, her grip damp with sweat. The humming grew louder with each step, not just sound now, but sensation, as though the noise was inside her chest, vibrating her bones. At the bottom, the concrete floor was slick with moisture. A single, naked bulb hung from the ceiling, unlit. The flashlight beams swept across stacked boxes, old furniture, rusted tools. The air was still but charged, like standing near a storm. The hum had no clear source. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Caleb moved cautiously, checking the corners, shining the light behind crates and shelves. "There's nothing here," he muttered. But then Cora spotted something. A wooden hatch in the far wall, half concealed by an old shelving unit. Unlike the rest of the basement, the hatch looked newer, untouched by mold or rot. It was framed with thick iron bolts, and no handle. Just a seam in the wall. The humming grew louder as they approached. "It's behind there," she said. Caleb hesitated. "You really want to open that?" Cora didn't answer. Her fingers had already brushed the wood. A shutter passed through the wall. The hatch clicked. Opened on its own. Caleb swore under his breath. The wooden door creaked outward an inch, just enough to reveal a black void behind it. No stairs. No ladder. Just a drop. Something moved in the dark. They both stepped back. Cora clutched his arm. "Did you see that?" Caleb nodded slowly. "There's something down there." A sound came from the hole, a whisper, clearer now, layered and overlapping, like dozens of voices speaking the same phrase again and again. "Come down! Come down! Come down!" "No," Cora said, shaking her head. "No way." But the floor beneath their feet suddenly trembled. The humming rose into a full-throated vibration. And the basement door, behind them, at the top of the stairs, slammed shut. Hard. They ran up the steps. Caleb reached the door first, and twisted the knob. Locked. He threw his shoulder into it. Nothing. The humming now sounded angry, deeper, faster, discordant. A pressure built in Cora's ears until her vision swam. From below, the voices called louder. "Come down!" A gust of wind blasted from the hatch, carrying the scent of brine and rot. Cora screamed and covered her mouth. Behind her, Caleb turned to face the dark. Then the whisper changed. It said a name. Not hers. "Caleb." Caleb froze. The whisper was soft, tender. The way his mother used to say his name when she woke him as a child. The way Cora had said it, once, when she told him she was pregnant. "Did you hear that?" he asked, breathless. Cora backed away from the hatch. "It said your name." "No. Not just that. The way it said it. Caleb, don't listen. It sounded like her." The whisper came again, sweeter now, more distinct. "Come here, Caleb. It's all right. I forgive you." His knees buckled. Cora caught him by the arm. "No. That's not her. Whatever's down there is using your memory. You know that." Caleb's eyes brimmed with tears. He was shaking. "But what if—" The humming dropped in pitch. Louder. More urgent. The house itself seemed to pulse with the sound. Something began knocking from inside the walls, slow, steady, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. From below, the voice whispered again. But now it sounded like dozens of other voices too, layered beneath the one he recognized. A chorus, a tangle of tongues, not all human. "Don't you feel it?" Caleb said, eyes wide. "It knows me. It knows everything. You can't go down there." But he was already moving toward the hatch. "Caleb!" He stood at the edge, staring into the black. Wind ruffled his shirt, though the air was still. The voices cooed and begged. Cora lunged, grabbing his arm with both hands. He looked down at her, eyes unfocused. "Let go. No. It's okay. I'm not afraid. I am," she shouted, tears hot in her eyes. "You said we'd get through this. You said we'd fix things together." The voices screamed. The hatch slammed shut with a violent clang, throwing both of them backward. The flashlight cracked against the wall and blinked out. They scrambled to their feet in darkness, breathless, trembling. Silence. The humming was gone. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open slowly, as if nothing had ever happened. They fled. Up the stairs. Out of the house. Into the blinding light of morning that had somehow, impossibly, returned. The rain was gone. The sky was blue. The world was normal again. They sat on the porch steps for a long time. Neither spoke. Eventually, Caleb whispered, "It knew everything about me. My guilt. My mistakes." It used her voice. Cora rested her head against his shoulder. "I know," she said. "It knew mine too." Inside, the house was utterly silent. But they both felt it watching. Waiting. They didn't go back inside that day. They walked the beach instead, silently, shoes in hand, letting the cold surf numb their ankles. The sky stayed bright, the sea calm, but there was no comfort in the quiet. The tide whispered like breath behind them, and every gull cry sounded like a name half screamed. When they returned to the house just before sundown, the lights were on. Every window glowing softly. But they had left all the switches off. They were sure of it. "I don't want to go back in," Cora said. "Me either," Caleb replied. "But we have to. We can't let it win." So they went in. Hand in hand. Inside, everything appeared unchanged. The basement door was shut. The hatch, if it had ever really opened, was out of sight, hidden behind crates and dust. But the humming was gone. No vibration, no whispers, no voices calling them back. That night they stayed in the upstairs bedroom together. No wine. No games. Just silence. Around 2 a.m., Caleb sat up abruptly in bed. "Cora," he whispered. "Do you hear that?" She was already awake. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. This time, it wasn't a hum. It was singing. Faint, wordless, echoing as if from beneath the floorboards. A lullaby in no language they knew, ancient and inhuman. Melancholy. Beautiful, in a way that made the heart ache. Cora's voice cracked. "I dreamed of a crib." Caleb turned to her. "A crib in the basement. Made of stone. And inside it, something sleeping." He reached for her hand. She flinched. "Cora, I don't think it's trying to hurt us," she said. "I think it needs something. You saw it? Not all of it. Just a shape. Huge. Coiled. With ribs like cathedral arches." She began to cry, not loud, just a quiet stream of tears. "I think it's in pain." They didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, they sat on the porch with mugs of untouched coffee, watching the sea. "We have to find out what it is," Cora said. "No," Caleb said. "We have to find out what it wants." He looked back at the house. It looked smaller now, as if the night had drained it of something vital. But the weight in the air remained. The memory of the hum, of the voice that called his name, it clung to his bones. There would be no running from this. Cora nodded slowly, as if answering something only she could hear. Then she stood and turned toward the house. The basement was waiting for them. The hatch was still closed, the scene barely visible behind the shelving, but the air vibrated with the echo of the song, as if the silence were a mask too thin to hold back the melody beneath it. They had brought candles this time, reluctant to rely on batteries, and a soft flicker made the concrete walls shimmer like wet skin. Cora approached the hatch and placed her palm flat against it. Nothing happened at first. Then warmth. Not the wrong kind, not the living breath that had repulsed her before, but something gentler, like a child pressing its forehead to hers in the dark. "It's awake," she said softly. Caleb moved beside her. "Ask it. Whatever it is. Ask what it wants." Cora closed her eyes. The song hummed in her chest, deep and resonant. She whispered, "What are you?" At first, there was no answer. Then words. Not heard but felt, vibrating through her bones, the way thunder makes your ribs tremble. "I am what they buried." Cora staggered back. Caleb caught her. "What? What did it say?" She tried to explain, but the words weren't easy. "It's old. Older than the house. Older than the beach. Something people tried to forget. And it was buried under this house like a seal." The hatch thumped from within, just once. A long, hollow knock. "Let me breathe." Cora shook her head. "I don't think it's evil. Cora, I think it's dying." Caleb backed away. "You're talking about letting it out. We don't even know what it is." She turned to him. "I don't think we're the first people it's called. Aunt June lived here. Remember what the woman at the store said? Don't poke around." They heard it too, and they ignored it. Left it here, in the dark. The hatch creaked. This time, no burst of wind, no screeching voice. Just a gentle, persistent sound, like a child knocking to be let in from the rain. Caleb looked at her. "If we open it, there's no undoing it." Cora stepped forward and knelt by the scene. "I know. Then we do it together." They pressed their palms to the wood in unison. There was a sound, like a breath being drawn after centuries underwater. The hatch opened. The hatch groaned open with the aching slowness of stone shifting beneath earth. The smell that rose up wasn't rot or sulfur or blood. It was salt water. Deep sea. Cold and ancient. Cora held her breath as the dark inside uncoiled. The void behind the hatch wasn't empty anymore. A stairway descended, not of wood or stone but something black and wet like obsidian, reflecting the candlelight in twisted patterns. It spiraled, impossibly far, as though it cut through the very bedrock of the earth. Cora took the first step. Caleb followed without hesitation, the candle trembling in his hand. The air grew colder with every step, the melody returning, but now it wasn't distant. It was here, all around them, and it sounded more like weeping than singing. Not grief for itself, but for something lost long ago. 10 steps. 20. 50. Time twisted. There were no walls, only black, and the sound of dripping water echoing from nowhere. Eventually, the staircase ended in a cavernous space. Just barely. Caleb stepped closer. The thing inside was coiled, curled, its body indistinct, somewhere between serpent and child, insect and god. But the feeling it radiated was unmistakable. It was suffering. Cora knelt by the edge of the crib. "You've been here so long." The thing stirred. A voice, not heard but felt again. "They feared me." Caleb swallowed hard. "What are you now?" "Memory. Dream. Hunger." Cora leaned closer, her voice cracking. "Do you want to be free?" There was a long silence. Then, yes. But not alone. The room pulsed with that final word. Alone. Caleb reached down and took Cora's hand. What does that mean? Before she could answer, the thing shifted, and in that instant they both saw it fully. Its eyes opened. Black, endless, and full of stars. Not evil. Just eternal. Then the chamber trembled. The walls began to close. The chamber moaned around them, like an organ flexing after centuries of sleep. The pulsing light intensified beneath the floor, revealing walls etched with symbols, spirals, hands, mouths, eyes, carved deep into the stone, shifting as if alive. Cora gripped Caleb's hand tighter. It's not letting us leave. The thing in the crib uncoiled slightly, its body enormous, undulating with impossible grace. Its skin, if it was skin, glistened like wet onyx, and along its length, dozens of mouths opened, not to scream but to speak. They spoke in fragments. Memories. Echoes. The fire in the field. The baby never cried. She watched the tide carry her sister away. Each phrase hit them like a punch to the soul. Their memories. Their grief. Their sins. Cora staggered back. It's showing us ourselves. No, Caleb whispered. It's feeding on them. And yet it didn't feel parasitic. It didn't feel evil. The thing, whatever it was, understood. It knew their wounds and offered its own in return. A communion of pain. I will hold what you cannot. Caleb fell to his knees, breath catching. Is that what you are? A vessel for sorrow? The thing's eyes, all of them, watched him. A womb. A tomb. A cradle for grief. Cora stared at the creature, tears falling freely. That's why it called to us. Because of the baby. Because of what we lost. The song resumed, now unmistakably a lullaby. Low, slow, sweet. Her chest ached with it. You want to take it from us, she said. Not take. Share. The chamber trembled again, but softer this time, like a settling heartbeat. The walls no longer seemed to close in. Instead, the air felt lighter, cleaner, like the space around them had exhaled. Caleb looked at Cora. Can we trust it? She stared into the crib. I think it's the only thing that understands. She stepped forward, arms trembling, and laid her hand on the edge of the cradle. The creature leaned into the touch, letting out a sigh, a sound so profoundly tired it nearly broke her. Then, without another word, it folded itself deeper into the crib, and the light beneath the floor dimmed. The humming stopped, and silence fell. But it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The chamber didn't vanish. It didn't collapse or fade like some dream. It simply quieted. The floor ceased pulsing. The blue glow dimmed to a faint radiance, like starlight underwater. The air was still cold, but no longer biting. The thing in the cradle had returned to stillness, its eyes closing, breath slowing. Not gone, but at peace. Cora and Caleb stood together, hands clasped, gazing down at it. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Caleb whispered, I don't feel the weight anymore. Cora nodded. It took it. The ache. The guilt. I still remember, but it doesn't hurt the same way. Caleb's eyes welled. Is this what healing feels like? Cora touched her stomach, absent-mindedly. Maybe not healing, but sharing the pain, that's something. A soft breeze rose around them, cool, not unnatural. And for the first time, they heard no voice beneath it. No whispering. No pressure. Just the breath of a sleeping thing, undisturbed. They turned to leave. The staircase was still there, but shorter now. No impossible descent, no vertigo. Just steps leading home. Upstairs, the basement had changed too. Brighter. Drier. The oppressive air gone. Cora touched the wall beside the now sealed hatch. I don't think anyone else will find it. They won't need to, Caleb said. Not unless they're carrying what we were. They emerged into the living room, into a house that no longer hummed. The lights worked. The phone had a dial tone. Even the storm outside had passed completely. And when they stepped onto the porch, the truck engine started with a single turn of the key. As they packed, neither of them said they were leaving forever. They knew better. The house had become part of them. Not cursed, not haunted, but inhabited. By something ancient and aching. A being that existed to carry what others could not. Before they drove off, Cora returned to the porch and looked out at the sea. Then she whispered, "Thank you?" And in the vast stillness, the faintest hum answered, no louder than a heartbeat. But warm, alive, and watching. Story 2, Whispers Beneath the Sand. The old beach house stood like a silent sentinel at the edge of Windward Cove, half swallowed by dunes and weathered by endless salt and sun. Its peeling blue paint was flaking like dried sea foam, windows boarded but cracked, and the porch sagged under the weight of years. The locals called it the Mariner's Refuge, though no sailor had lived there for decades. Jade pressed her forehead to the screen of her phone, frowning at the GPS. "We're close, right?" her brother Eli asked from the passenger seat. "Almost," Jade said, eyes scanning the cracked map. "This is the spot." They had driven 3 hours from the city, the coastal highway winding through pine forests and fog. The idea had been simple: rent the house for a weekend, escape the noise, and patch up their frayed sibling bond. After years apart, college, jobs, quiet resentments, it felt like a fresh start. Eli pulled off the road onto a sandy track, tires crunching through loose shells and driftwood. The air was thick with salt and wildflowers, and the low roar of the ocean filled the space between them. As they climbed from the car, the wind tugged at their clothes and hair. Jade squinted up at the house. "This place looks worse than the pictures." Eli shrugged. "It's a beach house. They all look like this eventually." Jade stepped onto the porch, ignoring the creak beneath her feet. The door was locked tight, but a weathered key hung from a rusty nail beside the frame. She grabbed it without hesitation. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old wood, with a hint of something else, something earthy and faintly sweet, like damp moss. Light filtered through the cracks in the boards, casting long stripes across the floor. The furniture was draped in sheets stained yellow with age, and the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper patterned with faded anchors and ropes. Jade ran her hand over a cracked windowpane, then glanced toward the stairs leading upstairs. "Let's get settled," she said. They unpacked the bare essentials, clothes, some snacks, a bottle of cheap wine, and lit a fire in the fireplace. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and sweeping sand against the walls. That first night, as the fire sputtered low and the house groaned with the tide's pull, Jade lay awake listening. There was a sound beneath the creaks and howls. A faint whispering. Soft, sibilant voices murmuring under the floorboards like secrets carried on the tide. She sat up, heart pounding. "Eli," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" He rolled over, eyes half closed. "Hear what?" "The voices." "Probably the wind," he said, but even his voice lacked certainty. Jade closed her eyes, trying to convince herself. But the whispers didn't stop. And they weren't just outside. They were inside. The whispers slid through the floorboards like a breath, weaving around Jade's ankles, curling into her thoughts. She sat frozen, listening as the voices rose and fell in a cadence that was almost, but not quite, human. Eli shifted beside her, pulling a blanket tighter around his shoulders. "You think this place is haunted?" Jade shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe." She stood and crossed the room toward the window. Outside, the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the sea was a dark, restless shadow. "We should check the basement," she said. Eli blinked. "You want to go down into that creepy cellar in the dark?" "Yes," Maybe the source is down there. They found the basement door at the back of the kitchen, a heavy oak slab with a rusted iron latch. The air around it was colder, heavier, as if it resisted their presence. Jade took a deep breath and pushed it open. The stairs were steep and narrow, descending into thick darkness. She flicked on her flashlight, the beams slicing through the gloom. The basement smelled of earth and salt, damp stone and something metallic. The whispers grew louder. They followed the sound, winding through piles of rotting crates and fishing nets until they reached the far wall. There, carved into the stone floor, was a shallow depression shaped like a rough circle. Around it, strange symbols had been etched, spirals and lines that looked almost like waves, or ripples frozen in stone. Jade knelt beside it. "Do you think this is some kind of ritual site?" Eli crouched down, tracing the carvings with his fingers. "Maybe. Or a warning." The whispers coalesced into a word barely audible. "Return." Jade shivered. "Return? Return what?" The flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed them. In the black, the whispers surged, urgent, insistent. "Return. Return." And then, beneath it all, a sound like something dragging itself across the stone. They scrambled to the stairs. The latch wouldn't budge. Jade pounded on the door. "Eli! Help!" The dragging noise was closer now, slow, deliberate. They heard a faint scrape. A cold breath on the back of their necks. Then silence. The darkness pressed in on them like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Jade's breath came in quick, shallow bursts as she fumbled for her phone's flashlight, but the screen stayed stubbornly black. Eli's hand found hers, trembling. "We're locked in," she whispered, the panic rising like a tide. "Calm down," Eli said, voice cracking. "There's got to be another way out." A metallic scrape echoed from the far corner, a slow, deliberate sound like fingernails dragging over stone. Jade forced herself to look toward it, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst her ribs. The beam of her flashlight suddenly flickered back to life, casting shaky light across the basement walls. Shadows danced and twisted, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to pulse with a rhythm all their own. Then, from the deepest corner, a figure emerged. Not fully formed, more like a distortion in the air, an elongated shadow with eyes that glowed faintly green. It moved with jerking, unnatural motions, its voice a ragged whisper that echoed in the cramped space. "Return, return what was taken." Jade took a step back, dragging Eli with her. "What do you want?" she demanded, voice trembling. The shadow's eyes seemed to burn brighter. "Return the gift or suffer." Eli swallowed hard. "What gift? Who are you?" The shadow stretched toward them, its form dissolving into wisps of mist that coiled around their ankles like cold fingers. Jade yanked her foot free, pulling Eli with her toward the stairs. The door was still locked tight. "Try the window," she urged. They scrambled across the floor, the whispers rising into a crescendo, a chorus of lost voices pleading, begging, demanding. At the basement window, covered by rusted bars, Jade slammed her fists against the glass. It was sealed, but the frame was old. If they could just break it. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The shadow hovered in the center of the room, silent but watching. Then, with a terrible suddenness, the floor beneath their feet shifted. The stone circle on the floor cracked open like a jaw. A cold wind surged upward, nearly blowing out their flashlights. Jade screamed as the space beneath them yawned wide. They were falling, into darkness deeper than night. The fall seemed endless, time stretching and folding in on itself. Jade's ears rang with a deafening silence, her body weightless, suspended in an abyss that smelled of salt and ancient earth. When she finally landed, it was with a bone-jarring thud on cold, wet sand. Eli landed beside her, groaning and coughing. The air was thick, heavy with moisture and the faintest tang of something metallic. Around them stretched a vast cavern, the walls slick with algae and glowing faintly with phosphorescent blue-green light. "This isn't possible," Jade whispered, pushing herself upright. Eli shone his flashlight around, revealing a landscape that looked like the bottom of the sea, a ruined temple half buried in sand, broken columns rising like ribs from the ground, and strange symbols carved deep into the rock. In the center of the cavern stood a towering statue of a woman with outstretched arms, her face eroded but her eyes seeming to gleam with a ghostly light. The whispers returned, but now they were clearer, less urgent, more like a song. "Return the gift! Return the gift!" Jade approached the statue cautiously, her fingers brushing the rough stone. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath her feet. Eli grabbed her arm. "We need to find what it wants. This place, it's a prison. For what, I don't know." They moved deeper into the cavern, the light shifting and warping around them. In a shallow pool near the statue's feet, something stirred. A small wooden box, encrusted with barnacles and seaweed, floated just beneath the surface. Jade reached into the water, pulling it out with trembling hands. The box was heavy and sealed tight with a rusted latch. She forced it open. Inside lay a delicate seashell, carved with the same strange symbols from the basement. The whispers swelled into a chorus. Eli looked at her. "Is this the gift?" Jade nodded, clutching the shell. The statue's eyes flared bright. Suddenly, the cavern began to collapse, stones falling, water rushing in. They ran, clutching the shell as the world crumbled around them. Bursting through the hidden doorway, they tumbled onto the sandy beach, gasping for breath beneath the sky streaked with dawn. The whispers had stopped. But the gift was still in Jade's hand. And something was watching from beneath the waves. The salty breeze was cool against their flushed skin, but the air felt heavy, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Jade stared down at the shell, its surface smooth and warm, the strange symbols faintly glowing in the dawn light. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. Eli rubbed his temples. "What do we do now? We can't just keep it. We have to return it," Jade said. "Back to the sea." But something twisted deep inside her. The shell felt alive, connected, like a tether to the place below. "Are you scared?" Eli asked quietly. Jade nodded, her fingers tightening around the gift. "More than I've ever been." They drove back to the house, its sagging frame staring back at them like a wounded beast. Inside, the silence was thick. The whispered voices were gone, replaced by an uneasy calm. That night, Jade dreamed of the sea. Waves crashing with furious force, pulling her under. A voice calling her name from beneath the water. A voice that was not Eli's, not her own. She woke gasping, heart pounding. Eli was awake too, sitting on the edge of his bed. "You're not alone in this," he said. "No," Jade whispered. "But I don't know if I want to be." Days passed, and the shell seemed to grow heavier. The symbols glowed brighter, and faint whispers began to leak into their waking hours, soft, elusive, like voices carried on the wind. One evening, a storm rolled in suddenly, turning the sky black. Thunder boomed as rain hammered the roof. The ocean outside churned violently, waves smashing against the rocks. Jade stood on the porch, clutching the shell. The whispers rose, urgent and insistent. "Return, return." A figure appeared in the crashing surf, a woman, translucent and glowing, her eyes deep pools of sorrow. Jade's breath caught. The woman's lips moved without sound, her gaze piercing the storm. The shell in Jade's hand pulsed wildly. "I'm coming," Jade said, voice trembling. The woman reached toward her, the ocean's fury parting around her like a veil. Jade took a step forward. Jade's heart hammered as she stepped off the porch, each step heavier than the last. The rain lashed her face, salty and cold, mixing with the sweat pooling beneath her skin. The woman in the surf didn't speak, but her eyes held 1,000 unspoken stories, pain, loss, longing. Eli called out, voice cracking over the storm. Jade, wait! It's not safe! But she kept walking, drawn as if by a thread too strong to resist. The shell in her hand pulsed like a living thing, warmth radiating up her arm. The waves curled and crashed, sending sprays of foam and spray into the wind. The woman's form shimmered and wavered, her translucent hair flowing like seaweed in the tide. When Jade reached the water's edge, the surf was cold enough to burn. The woman extended a hand, beckoning. Jade hesitated, then, with a deep breath, plunged into the water. The ocean swallowed her instantly, cold and infinite. The storm faded behind her, replaced by an eerie calm and a light that seemed to glow from everywhere and nowhere. Under the surface, the woman's eyes locked with hers. Jade held the shell out. The ghostly figure reached for it, and the moment their fingers touched, a flood of memories crashed into Jade's mind. A child lost to the sea. A mother's desperate prayers. A promise broken beneath a storm. Tears welled in Jade's eyes as the woman's sorrow poured into her, overwhelming but also cleansing. Then the shell dissolved into light. The woman smiled, a smile of relief and release, and slowly faded away. Jade kicked toward the surface, lungs burning. She broke through the water with a gasp, the storm still raging above but somehow less menacing. Eli was waiting, arms outstretched. "You're okay," he said, pulling her close. Jade nodded, shivering but smiling. The whispers stopped. She whispered. And somewhere, deep beneath the waves, the ocean was still. Back in the house, the silence was complete. No whispers, no cold drafts, no shadows slipping beneath the doors. Jade and Eli sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sea calm from its recent fury to a gentle, rhythmic pulse. Jade traced the scars on her wrist, reminders of the night's struggle. She felt different. Lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from her soul. Eli handed her a cup of steaming tea. "You were incredible out there." She smiled tiredly. "I just did what had to be done." For a moment, the two siblings sat in peaceful quiet, the only sound the distant call. And the beach house, weathered but standing, held its secrets beneath the sand, waiting for the next story to unfold. Story 3: The Last Light at Shoreline Point. Shoreline Point was a place that didn't show up on most maps, a jagged outcrop of rock and driftwood where the land met the churning sea with a bitter, unrelenting edge. At its tip stood a weather-beaten lighthouse, long decommissioned, its once proud beacon dark and cracked, staring out like a blind eye. Mara hadn't meant to come here. The letter arrived 3 weeks ago, typed on heavy cream paper with no return address, only her name and a cryptic message. "Find the light before it goes out." She traced the words again, fingers trembling. Now, standing at the rusted gate of the lighthouse, wind whipping her coat, Mara felt the weight of the unknown pressing down. She pushed the gate open. The hinges groaned like a sigh. Inside, the air was thick with salt and dust, the spiraling staircase cloaked in shadows. Every step she took stirred decades of forgotten memories. This was her grandmother's home, her last refuge before she vanished 15 years ago. Mara's heart pounded. She'd spent years chasing answers, and now, finally, she was here. A sudden crash echoed from above. The lighthouse shuddered like a living thing. She froze. "Hello?" Her voice barely carried over the wind. No answer. Only the steady, low click of the old machinery winding somewhere deep within. Mara started up the stairs. The walls whispered, faint voices woven into the creaks and groans. "Don't let it go out." At the top, the lantern room opened to a storm-racked sky. The great light sat shattered, its glass shattered, but the bulb inside pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat struggling to survive. Mara reached out, fingers brushing the cold metal. Suddenly, the light flared, blinding her. When her vision cleared, the room was empty, but the air was charged with electricity and something else. Something watching. Mara stumbled back, blinking against the harsh glare. The lantern's pulse was steady now, a slow, rhythmic throb that seemed to echo her own heartbeat. She swallowed hard, the hairs on the back of her neck rising. A faint breeze stirred inside the sealed room, carrying a scent like ozone mixed with salt and something faintly floral. "Grandma?" Mara whispered. Her voice cracked. No answer. Only the steady thrum of the light, pulsing like a call. She took a cautious step forward. The floor beneath her creaked, and the walls seemed to breathe, faint shifts, subtle movements, as if the lighthouse itself was alive, waiting. Mara's fingers brushed a tarnished brass panel beside the bulb. A hidden latch clicked open, revealing a small compartment with a folded letter inside. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the brittle paper. The message was brief. "The light keeps the darkness at bay. When it dies, the shore dies too. Beware the tides that come with the night." A chill ran through her. Before she could read more, the air shifted. Whispers circled her, voices layered and distant but unmistakably human. "Don't let it go out." The light flickered. The storm outside grew louder, wind howling, rain battering the windows. Mara's eyes darted to the broken panes. Shadows pulled in the corners, twisting and shifting like smoke. Then, from the darkened hallway below, came a sudden thud. Mara's breath caught. "Hello?" she called, voice steadying. No reply. She moved toward the stairs, every nerve on edge. The lighthouse groaned, the old timber flexing under unseen pressure. Another thud. Closer. Mara gripped the railing, heart pounding as she descended into the gloom. The stairs creaked beneath Mara's cautious steps, shadows flickering like living things in the dim light. The thudding noise echoed from the ground floor, heavy, deliberate, each impact sending a shiver through the ancient wood. She reached the landing and peered into the gloom below. The main chamber was cloaked in darkness, the only light a faint glow from the storm-lashed windows. A figure lurked near the cracked fireplace, a silhouette too tall and still to be human. Mara's breath caught. "Who's there?" The figure didn't move, but a low whisper floated on the air. "Keep the light." Mara took a shaky step forward. Suddenly, the figure dissolved into a swarm of black moths that fluttered wildly, filling the room with a frantic, eerie noise. They scattered toward the broken window and vanished into the storm. Mara covered her ears, heart pounding. The whisper grew louder. "The tide is coming. The darkness will claim all. The last light must hold." She shivered, realizing the storm outside wasn't just weather, it was something alive. Suddenly, a cold hand grasped her shoulder. She spun around, heart racing. No one was there. But a single moth lingered, its wings shimmering with an unnatural glow. It hovered in front of her eyes. Mara closed her hand over it. The moth's glow seeped into her skin, burning cold. Visions flooded her mind, an ancient sea, a village swallowed by waves, a light snuffed out. And then a name, Shoreline Point. She gasped, staggering back. The storm's roar was rising, a monstrous tide ready to crash. Mara knew what she had to do. Mara's hands trembled as she clutched the moth, now dim and lifeless in her palm. The vision still lingered, ghostly echoes of a village lost beneath endless waves, of faces twisted in despair, of a promise broken long ago. She turned back toward the spiral staircase, the weight of responsibility settling like a stone in her chest. "The last light must hold," she murmured. Outside, the storm raged with relentless fury. Thunder rolled like ancient drums, waves crashed against the cliffs, and sheets of rain hammered the lighthouse windows. She had to fix the lantern. Mara ascended the stairs, determined. The lantern room was a chaos of shattered glass and rusted metal, but the bulb pulsed weakly, stubbornly fighting the darkness. She examined the machinery, hands slick with salt water and grime, searching for a way to bring it back to life. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Across the room, shadows coalesced into the shape of an old woman, her grandmother, face pale and worn, eyes deep wells of sorrow. "Mara," she whispered, "you must not fail." Tears welled in Mara's eyes. "I won't." The apparition reached out, and Mara felt a strange warmth spread through her fingers. She focused, channeling the strength her grandmother's presence gave her. With a groan, the machinery creaked to life. The bulb flared brighter. Outside, the storm seemed to pause. But then, an unnatural silence fell. The shadows thickened. Something moved in the dark beyond the windows, tall, shifting shapes with eyes like dying stars. The darkness was waiting. And Mara understood. The light was not just a beacon. It was a barrier. If it failed, everything Shoreline Point had held at bay would be unleashed. The light steadied, a fragile pulse against the encroaching void. Mara stood by the lantern's control, hands steadying the mechanisms as the shadows writhed outside like living ink. The storm had quieted, but the darkness wasn't gone. It lurked in the edges, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the door to the lantern room slammed shut with a force that rattled the entire lighthouse. Mara spun around, heart pounding. The room was cold, unnatural cold, and the glow from the bulb flickered erratically. The shadows coalesced into a figure, tall and gaunt, draped in seaweed and salt-crusted cloth, eyes like hollow pits. "You cannot keep the light burning forever," it hissed, voice like the grinding of rocks. Mara swallowed her fear. "I won't let you take this place." The figure advanced, tendrils of darkness snaking toward her. Mara's hand flew to a rusted lever near the lantern. She pulled it down hard. The light surged. Blinding. The shadows screamed, recoiling from the brilliance. The walls shook, the lighthouse groaning as if alive. Mara stood her ground, heart racing. The light flared, a beacon of defiance against the consuming blackness. Then silence. The shadow dissolved into mist, carried away by the rising sun breaking over the horizon. Mara collapsed to her knees, breath ragged but victorious. She looked out at the calm sea, the waves sparkling gold. The light had held. But she knew the battle was only beginning. Somewhere beyond the dawn, the darkness waited. And the last light at Shoreline Point was the world's fragile shield.